Policies help our country promote change and make improvements. For this project, I chose Bill H.R. 1332, the Fair Care Act of 2019. This was introduced by Representative Bruce Westerman, a Republican in the House. I got in contact with Mr. Westerman, who answered a few of my questions. He told me that he made the bill because there needs to be a policy improvement for healthcare in America. He had 3 objectives while making this bill. 1. Covering pre-existing conditions. 2. Lowering the financial burden for Americans both in the cost of healthcare services and insurance premiums, and the amount of tax dollars spent on healthcare, which impacts our debt. And 3. To give healthcare consumers more choice and flexibility. He also mentioned to me that he was getting feedback and recommendations for this bill. The next person I decided to interview was Patrick Ross. I decided to interview him because his organization, the Joint Commission, deals with healthcare and the bill would affect them. The first question I decided to ask was, how do you feel about this piece of legislation? His response was, he doesn't think it would affect them directly, but he does think it would affect them indirectly. He said he would be interested in seeing how everything played out, and then he went on to talk about different clauses and how they applied to his organization and the cost of healthcare. The second question I asked him was, do you think it will accomplish what the bill would hope it would accomplish? His response was, he doesn't think it would pass, especially because it's a Republican bill in the Democratic House. He said he thinks it would accomplish the standard Republican goals and doesn't think it would happen. Along the way, I also interviewed Tawan Smith, a site management associate at PRA, a healthcare company. I decided to interview her because her company would be implementing the bill regarding the price of healthcare. Here's an interview with Tawan Smith.
Hi, how are you today? Thank you so much for letting me do this interview with you. And may I ask you, have you looked at the bill that I sent you recently?
I had a chance to glance at the bill, yes.
Do you need me to give you more information on it, or are you okay?
I think I'm okay. I could try to answer some of your questions.
Okay,
based on what I know about the bill. So.
Okay, thank you. So my first question is, what does your company do?
So we are pretty much what we call a research organization. We send drugs to hospitals and sites to people who usually can't afford the drug. So they call into our company and ask and request assistance with the drug. And so it's usually the hospital or the doctor's offices that are calling and requesting the drug. It's specific drugs. So it's pretty much high-end drugs that are extremely costly. And so we ship it out to the hospitals and the doctor's offices, depending on who's requesting.
Okay, thank you so much. So my next question is, how do you perceive this legislation?
I just perceive it as another form or type of Obamacare. It is different. I think it's meant to maybe replace actually Obamacare, and it's a more conservative view on Obamacare.
Okay, thank you. My next question is, what do you think is good about the legislation?
What do I think is good? So, I think it does contain some points that were included in the Obamacare. I'm trying to think about what some things I saw. I saw some inclusion on some Medicare, inclusion on types of pre-existing conditions, including that as well. I saw some inclusion on SHA and how it will take on the form of being included in that. And just some small things I noticed, some things.
What do you think is bad or missing in the bill?
That's a good question. So maybe some affordability on the drugs. Drugs are extremely high, and the private sector drug companies have gotten away with charging an astronomical amount for their drugs. So much that people that actually need the drugs can't afford them. So maybe adding in that bill a cap on what these companies can charge, because it does no good if the drugs are out there for consumers but they can't afford to pay for them.
Okay, thank you. And my last and final question is, what do you hope will be addressed in future legislation?
I hope that maybe issues on certain programs, maybe such as like the affordability of drugs is included, or in future legislation. Pre-existing conditions are included in the future legislation. Medicare information is included in future legislation. The accessibility for underserved, underprivileged communities could be included in future legislation on how they will gain access. Those types of things.
Okay, thank you.
In conclusion, Mr. Ross, Ms. Smith, and Representative Westerman all gave me different perspectives and ideas of the bill. It led to a better understanding of the healthcare bill in itself. I think it does address the larger issue, but also agree with Mr. Ross that it won't get passed, although legislation is a critical aspect of our republic.